Focus is not necessarily about your time. It's where your attention, the mental energy is going. And sometimes that can actually be a waste. You're listening to the Bear in Mind Podcast, episode 165.
A podcast that breaks it down so you can break the cycle for good. Now, your host, Tara Rama, but you can call her T.
We're talking about mental energy and how we focus that, how we use that on a day-to-day basis. And it can translate into how we focus our time. And here I'm going to talk about where our attention is, even when we're doing the things that we want to be doing. So even when we're cooking and we're chopping onions, when we're doing some of those automatic things, where is our focus? Where is that mental focus going? And I noticed that even when I'm doing something that's in my calendar and I go to do the task and it's a little bit automatic, my mental focus is sometimes on something else. And I notice that it takes me longer to actually finish the task. I get it done, and instead of it taking maybe 20 minutes to finish this repetitive task that I need to get done, usually it's administration, it'll take me 30 minutes because there'll be kind of this mental shift focus from what I'm doing. I'll think about something, and we can even take it a step further if that focus comes up and it's too much and we're focusing on something else. Sometimes we take a break and we go and pick up our smartphone and we scroll through on the internet or social media. So that's how we kind of know some of those actions that we take that we're like, oh, we've been spending so much time on social media, 15 minutes has gone by. So that can be kind of the outwardly thing that we see sometimes when we lose focus and what is it that we're doing. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because I noticed that my energy was going a lot to my partner and my daughter. I was thinking about them because I talked about an episode, I think it was 154, it's called The Anger Push. And how kind of now that I feel like I manage my anger quite in a fast manner, in a more efficient manner, and I'm not reactive to that anger and I've been getting the wisdom out of it, I don't react to situations. I tend to be more calm or more present and seeing a situation, and what ends up happening, what has ended up happening is actually my partner now is showing more anger, and then that is manifesting itself in almost daily arguments between the two. And I noticed that my energy was so focused on, because he is the adult, I was tending to blame him for the argument as if, because he's the adult. And so I kind of had this kind of, well, it's his responsibility. And so my energy was going there. And also my energy is I'm staying more calm and I don't react to it. I can see it unfold and I can see what is happening and why there's this friction between the two of them. And also, should I say something? Because I don't interfere unless it goes against my boundaries, which I do talk about in the Anger Push and in co-parenting differences, that episode, I talk about establishing those boundaries. So my focus has now gone to, my mental energy has gone on to this situation. And so this is hence the inspiration for this episode. And when this happens, it's almost like it's happening and you don't realize that it's generating emotions in your body in that moment. So you can be doing something and your focus is somewhere else. You can even be reading a book and all of a sudden your mind goes somewhere else and that focus is there. And where is that focus going to? And usually for me, what I notice is that focus is on the past, on something that has happened that I now cannot change the facts of that situation, it's usually rooted in some negative emotion. And here's the funny thing about that negative emotion. I'm creating it in that moment right now, focusing that negative energy, and I'm bringing it to what it is that I'm currently doing. So if I'm thinking about the argument that happened last night between the two of them while I'm doing my emails this morning, I am bringing that negative energy, that mental energy into that current task. So when we look at where is our mind focusing, sometimes we don't even realize that it's focusing on something that is generating negative emotion. Now, it might not be intense. It might not be something that we go and then act upon, but we are, in a way, acting with that emotion as we bring it to our current task. And this can also happen when we bring it back to stop yelling and breaking the cycle. This can also happen when we spend an enormous amount of focus on what has happened in the past if we've yelled. So we're feeling guilty and our energy is on that regret. Our energy is on that guilt. We're spending the mental overload right there. And this is what I mean. We're overloading a negative emotion. So if we're experiencing something like guilt and it's a slower emotion and we still have it, we're ruminating over it. And it's almost like we're putting this new emotion on top of that old emotion. So we have maybe guilt lingering in us. And then we're thinking about that situation in a current something that happened yesterday and currently today, we're thinking about that. So then it's generating a new negative emotion on top of this already negative emotion we've been feeling, like guilt. So it's guilt on top of whatever negative emotion. Maybe we're berating ourselves. Maybe it's more self-loathing on top of the guilt. And so then we've created this mental overload. And this is where all of our energy, that mental energy, is going to. That's where our focus is. And the funny thing about it is we don't realize it. And I slowly started to see that, especially as I've started to move through anger quicker. It opens up a lot more space to see some of this focus that's been happening, to see where my mind is going to, and that I'm still spending time in a lot of negative emotion. I'm putting negative emotion on top of negative emotion. I was frustrated in the situation last night between the two of them. I decided to step away. I decided not to get involved. And then I was thinking about it this morning as I was doing my emails. And then I was putting whatever that negative emotion, I haven't processed it yet, but I know it was not a good emotion. I think there was even a little bit, if I had to guess, a little bit of disgust in there. On top of that, and on top of that frustration that I still find that I'm still holding on to. And so now all of my focus for today has been coming through negative emotion. And if you notice that this is exhausting, this is where a lot of the exhaustion, when we feel exhausted, a lot of times it's mental exhaustion. And we think that it's because this situation happened yesterday or a week ago, and we don't see that we're creating that current exhaustion and overloading ourselves with how we're thinking about it today, what we're doing with it today, how it's sitting there in our minds. Sometimes we don't notice it, and that's why sometimes we go and we pick up our phone and we answer that text, that ping that comes up, and then the overload is too much. So we seek relief from that text or social media. But the overload is still there. We're still spending and focusing unconsciously a lot of times still on something that's happened. And so one of the things that I started to do, and I self-coach myself, and all this means is you can do this too, is you write down what it is you're thinking, even when you don't know what you're thinking. So there was a day, I believe it was yesterday morning, I was feeling okay. Nothing seemed to be going on in my mind, and I even wrote that down. I'm feeling okay. And I answer that question, why? Why am I feeling okay? Because, and I filled up, I think I wrote 5 sentences. And then I threw the paper away. I have one of those pads of paper where you rip it off the top because I'm just going to throw that away. Start there. Start with 1 sentence. And you've probably heard me say this, but this is something I'm also adding on top of how I coach myself. This is just something where I'm writing out some of that to get that negative energy, to refocus myself. I'm writing a couple sentences down on a scrap piece of paper and then throwing it away to get it out of my mind and to help refocus. And even if we don't know there's negative energy, practicing that helps open up the brain. Even saying, I think I'm okay, nothing's going on, I feel okay. And getting that out helps to kind of open up some space. Okay, we're feeling okay, but then notice at the end of the day, I had a lot of stuff going on in my mind. And so when we start to do this and we can refocus by getting out whatever it is, the top layer. And here I'm just talking about that top layer. We're not talking about if an incident happened yesterday and you need to still really process that emotion. But here I'm going at what's that top layer you're putting on right now in this moment, and just getting that out on paper and then throwing that paper away. What you'll find is you can refocus a little bit better on the task that you're doing and get it done in the time frame that you want. And that is how that mental focus then affects how you're spending your time. That's all I have for you this week. I'll check back with you next.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.